July 25, 2000, a day that forever marked the annals of aviation history with an indelible scar. This was the day when Air France Flight 4590, a Concorde, met with a catastrophic event that shook the world. The Concorde, a marvel of modern engineering and a symbol of luxury in the skies, was prepped for its daily journey from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. With its 100 passengers and 9 crew members on board, the aircraft began its usual taxi down the runway. The weather was clear, with no hint of the impending disaster. As the Concorde thundered down the runway, gaining speed for liftoff, a piece of debris on the runway left by a previous flight was ingested by one of its engines. This seemingly small event triggered a catastrophic chain of reactions. The debris ruptured a tire, sending a shockwave into the fuel tank, igniting a fierce fire. Despite the fire alarm sounding in the cockpit and the control tower alerting them of the fire, the pilots, faced with the impossible decision of aborting takeoff at such a high speed, decided to continue. The aircraft managed to lift off, but the damage was done. The fire, fed by the aircraft's fuel, was uncontrollable, and the damaged engine was losing power rapidly. Just a few seconds after takeoff, the stricken Concorde, trailing a plume of black smoke, began to lose altitude. With its power compromised and the fire intensifying, the aircraft began a fatal descent. Unable to reach the airport for an emergency landing, the Concorde crashed into a hotel near the town of Gonesse, just a few miles from the airport. Emergency services were on the scene almost immediately, fighting the inferno and searching for any possible survivors. But the impact and the subsequent fire had been too severe. In a mere 2 minutes, 113 lives were extinguished, and the Concorde, the queen of the skies, was brought to her knees. As the smoke cleared, the daunting task of unraveling the cause of this disaster had just begun. Investigators from multiple agencies, including the French Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, or BEA, were immediately on the scene. They painstakingly sifted through the wreckage, looking for any clues that could shed light on the reason for the crash. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered on the runway, a thin strip of metal later identified as a part from a Continental Airlines DC-10 that had taken off minutes before the ill-fated Concorde. The investigators theorized that this metal strip may have caused one of the Concorde's tires to burst on takeoff. The tire explosion theory was supported by multiple witnesses who reported seeing a burst of flames from the aircraft's undercarriage during takeoff. The investigators surmised that a chunk of the ruptured tire had struck the underside of the plane's wing, leading to a catastrophic rupture of the fuel tank. The fuel tank rupture was a critical finding. The Concorde, like all aircraft, was designed to withstand a tire burst. But the investigators believed that the force of the tire debris striking the fuel tank had been so severe that it had caused the tank to rupture, spilling fuel directly into the engine's path. This fuel spill, combined with the heat and pressure of the engine's exhaust, could have ignited a fire. The fire, in turn, could have caused the engine's catastrophic failure, leading to the loss of power and control that ultimately resulted in the crash. But the investigation was far from over. The discovery of the metal strip, the tire burst, and the fuel tank rupture were only the first pieces of a complex puzzle. The investigators had to determine how these events had unfolded, in what order and why. They also had to consider other factors, such as the aircraft's maintenance history, the crew's actions, and the weather conditions on the day of the crash. The investigation would reveal a chilling sequence of events, a chain of unfortunate incidents that led to the fatal crash. With the cause of the crash identified, the stage was set for a trial that would send shockwaves through the aviation industry. The criminal trial that followed the crash of Air France Flight 4590 was nothing short of dramatic. Continental Airlines, the American aviation giant, found itself under the microscope. Charged with involuntary manslaughter, the allegation was that a titanium strip from one of their DC-10 aircraft, carelessly left on the runway, had triggered the tragic event. The prosecution built their case around this piece of metal, arguing that it had punctured the Concorde's tire, sending high-speed debris into the fuel tanks and causing the catastrophic fire. Continental, however, disputed this. They maintained that the Concorde was already aflame before it encountered the titanium strip, suggesting design flaws in the Concorde itself were to blame. The trial unfolded over months, with intense scrutiny on every detail. After much deliberation, the court delivered its verdict in December 2010, 10 long years after the crash. Continental Airlines and one of their mechanics were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. However, this verdict was not the final word on the matter. In 2012, a French appeals court overturned the ruling. The court stated that the mechanic's actions did not amount to a crime and that Continental Airlines could not be held accountable for the crash. The aviation industry was left reeling. As the legal battles played out, the aftermath of the crash continued to ripple through the lives of those affected. Compensation to the victims' families was a contentious issue. Eventually, Air France agreed to pay an average of €1 million to the families of each passenger who lost their lives. This was in addition to payments made by Continental Airlines and Airbus, the manufacturer of the Concorde. The crash and the trial had a profound impact on the aviation industry. Safety procedures were scrutinized and overhauled. Airlines across the globe reviewed their maintenance protocols, striving to ensure that such a disaster could never happen again. The Concorde, once a symbol of luxury and speed, was now a symbol of tragedy. The crash of Flight 4590 marked the beginning of the end for the supersonic airliner. By 2003, just 3 years after the crash, all Concordes had been retired from service. The dream of supersonic passenger travel for the time being was over. The trial and its aftermath served as a stark reminder of the immense responsibility that comes with aviation. It underscored the need for stringent safety measures and the importance of accountability. While justice was sought in courtrooms, the aviation world grappled with the far-reaching implications of the crash. The legacy of Air France Flight 4590 continues to shape the aviation industry, a sobering reminder of the cost when things go tragically wrong.